It's a new edition of the Bigfoot Journal, your twice-monthly Bigfoot news update. What happened and what's ahead in Bigfoot research and news, only on the Untold Radio Network. The Bigfoot Journal is now. With your host, Mike Luci.
And 3, 2, 1. What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the Bigfoot Journal, your bi-weekly review of what happened and what's ahead in the Bigfoot world. If it's your first time joining us, let me tell you how this works. We sweep the internet every other week, highlight the top Bigfoot reports and news stories, and share our findings in a fast-paced 30-minute time frame. Here are this episode's top stories. Could Bigfoot be lurking in the Garden State? Our lead story looks at 3 sightings in a certain part of New Jersey that, as you'll find out, has everything a Sasquatch would need to exist and stay under the radar. Do dogs and Bigfoot mix? We'll look at the history of reported Bigfoot interactions with dogs and if man's best friend can be a useful asset or liability to researchers. You'll also get the full scoop on lost Bigfoot media, photos, videos, even physical remains that supposedly went missing over the years, what they allegedly showed, and if any of them could still be found. We've got all that plus much more for this episode that you don't want to miss, so make sure you're ready because we're about to get this started. Let's go.
Bigfoot in history is now.
When most people think about the best spots for Bigfoot, places like the Pacific Northwest, Michigan, Ohio, or parts of the Deep South usually come to mind. And despite Bigfoot reports coming out of every state in the lower 48 plus Alaska, there are some that many researchers won't even give the time of day, despite having surprisingly extensive histories of reported encounters. Our lead story looks at a recent Medium.com article that covers 3 sightings coming out of a purported hotspot from one of these very states, New Jersey. Known for its food, beaches, The Sopranos, and of course, its sports teams, New Jersey is the U.S.'s most densely populated state, and probably one of the last places you'd expect to find Bigfoot. Even when it comes to cryptids, the Jersey Devil is considered the face of high strangeness in the state. This winged creature has been a centuries-old fixture in Garden State lore and pop culture, which is said to dwell in a mysterious part of New Jersey called the Pine Barrens. Spanning about 1.1 million acres, the Pine Barrens makes up roughly 22% of New Jersey's landmass, with sections of remote forest that stretch for miles. While the Jersey Devil headlines this region's storied timeline of high strangeness, it overshadows the Pine Barrens' historic track record of Bigfoot reports. The Medium.com article recounts 3 eyewitness encounters from researcher Chris Cyrus, which happened in a part of the Pine Barrens called Bass River State Forest. The first one happened in 1975. It describes a 9-year-old boy's story of seeing one watch him through his cabin's bedroom window. The second one details a pair of alleged encounters 2 brothers said they had over a 24-hour period in 1986. And the third encounter, which occurred in 1996, recounts a family's supposed nighttime sighting of a strange creature after their RV was violently shaken. Chris said he collected these reports firsthand, which are just the tip of the iceberg from this part of New Jersey. When I spoke with Chris, one of the topics we covered was the credibility behind these reports his article featured. Here's what he had to say.
It's mostly just focused primarily on how all of these sightings happened within a 10 to 30 mile radius apart of one another. But ironically, they're only about 10 to 15 minutes apart. They all happened in different time periods. And as these different time periods carried on, so did the migration. The first sighting that occurred in the mid-70s was when there was still building around the cabins area of Lake Bassagani. And then in the 80s and 90s was when it fully became expanded. And that, as well as also, too, there was more expansions to the woods heading north of Tommy's Branch and then by Phillips Road. It looked to me as if it was like these encounters as time went on, these creatures were able to play more smarter with the migration. They weren't afraid to go too deep into these woods because they didn't think people would be camping too deep into these woods.
So the reports in Chris's article are just 3 of several dozen you can find coming out of the Pine Barrens and Bass River State Forest. In theory, the Pine Barrens has everything a Bigfoot needs to exist while remaining hidden. An abundance of food, water, very few apex predators, plus miles of remote forests and swamps. But even if Bigfoot is real, does New Jersey's dense population automatically disqualify it from existing in the state? We asked Chris to share his thoughts on this matter.
You wonder even in like Arkansas, or if you think in like a state like the Carolinas or the Dakota, or a place like Michigan, where there's enough acre and land to where these things can stay in sanctuary forever. And the same applies to the Garden State, right? So you take into consideration the Pine Barrens, which is about almost close to under 1 million acres, all throughout, beginning from Pemberton down. You got Wharton State Forest, Bass River's 30,000 acres of land approximately. There's a lot of places that I feel in Pine Barrens that there's enough resources based upon the amount of acre. And it's no surprise that there's a lot of food resources there. There's also a lot of crops there too, a lot of berries that are being grown within the land. And of course, there's also these farmhouses that are all in between. There's a lot of resources that I think validate and help precise the amount of these sightings with these creatures to live in civilization, to live in sanctuary.
While New Jersey is indeed the most densely populated U.S. state, roughly half of New Jersey's residents are compacted in its northeast corner, which only accounts for around 12 to 15% of the state's total square mileage. Aside from its northeast corner and miles of coastline, most of New Jersey is actually sparsely populated forest, farmland, and mountainous terrain. I asked Chris how likely these specific factors could allow a Bigfoot-like creature to conceal its presence in or near other densely populated states.
You really have to sit back and you have to take a look at a specific region, whether it would be Ocean County or if it was Buffalo, New York, or if it was right by the borderlines between. It has a lot to do too with demographics and specifically where the food goes. If there is enough resources in one section that they'll follow into, it depends on the migration process. It also just focusedly depends on what they're feeling. I do think that sometimes they do pick suburban locations because that's just off their mind. I see that there's a lot more of an occurrence now where people are starting to see in a rapidly amount of sightings in around metropolitan locations, specifically areas that are closer to woodline, areas that are almost in ruin. I'm not saying you're going to find Bigfoot, walking George Washington Bridge, but I definitely will say that you're going to definitely hear stories of Bigfoot right around the area, but that depends on what you believe and what you don't believe.
There's links in the video's description to Chris's fullmedium.com article and his YouTube channel, The Venomous Fringe, which just relaunched last week and contains more quality content on all things high strangeness. So to bring things full circle, could Bigfoot be lurking in New Jersey's Pine Barrens? And is it possible the right conditions can keep it hidden in or around other high population areas? Chris's article definitely offers some thought-provoking insights on this topic, which could reshape our understanding of the centuries-old phenomenon, and, if they're real, why Squatches can be found in a lot more places many Bigfooters wouldn't even expect. Over the years, a number of photos, videos, and other pieces of media allegedly documenting Bigfoot evidence have supposedly been lost. While some reportedly disappeared during natural or man-made disasters, others seem to have vanished under more mysterious circumstances. This segment will dive into how many pieces of lost Bigfoot media supposedly existed, what they might have shown, and if any of them can still be found. A recent post on the Bigfoot subreddit listed several dozen pieces of Bigfoot media that were reportedly lost over the years. They're part of a YouTube video that was recently posted on the channel Truth is Scarier Than Fiction. The full video is over 40 minutes. It features several other lost or missing photos, videos, audio, sketches, even stories about physical remains. In addition to Bigfoot, the video covers lost media of other cryptids like lake and sea monsters, neo-dinosaurs, large cats, along with giant reptiles and bugs. But sticking to Bigfoot, the list and video both mention some pretty well-known stories of lost media, like this well-known image, which is said to be the only one from a larger series of photos that went missing, some higher resolution versions of the Patterson Gimlin film, alleged documentation of the so-called Bluff Creek Massacre, and the supposed Oklahoma casino footage. The list also features some lesser-known lost Bigfoot media that caught my eye, like two photos allegedly taken by plane from Sonora, California in the 1960s, and one story of Chinese soldiers supposedly killing a Yaren in 1947. Upon reviewing the list, I found some recurring details that I thought were worth noting. Although some had been documented in media outlets like newspapers and magazines, many accounts seemed to be anecdotal, and while some were first-hand, most of the lost media seemed to originate from second- and third-hand accounts, which obviously puts their credibility into question. A few also supposedly happened prior to the Patterson Gimlin film's release in 1967. Many also reportedly contain close-ups or clear images of Squatches. And I don't know about you, but I find that pretty convenient that the clearest ones always seem to go missing. The circumstances behind many supposed Bigfoot media disappearances also have some pretty interesting details in common. A decent chunk were reportedly lost in times of war and unrest. Many were allegedly stolen, and while the whereabouts of others are known, they're supposedly part of private collections. So it's possible a few pieces of missing Bigfoot media might indeed exist, but they're technically only lost to the general public. Obviously, feel free to share any information you might have on lost Bigfoot media, because on a case-by-case basis, perhaps there's a few whose backstories have enough truth to them that might make it worth investigating. And if we could verify some of these accounts, they could potentially help us make major headway in getting to the bottom of this elusive phenomenon. But until that time comes, if it ever does at all, Tales of Lost Bigfoot media will merely be viewed as nothing more than just that, stories.
Report Roundup is now.
Alright, this is our report roundup. If they're out there, it's our part of the show that updates you on the latest Bigfoot reports from major databases and across the internet. We have some interesting reports coming out of Illinois, Texas, Washington State, and abroad. Plus, our You Decide part of the roundup is back with some bizarre footage that's literally worth a closer look. We're kicking things off with two recent BFRO reports. This first one happened in Northeast Texas. It describes ongoing activity a gentleman named Joshua and his family claim they're experiencing on their property in Camp County. The reports describe them hearing clacks, whoops, knocking sounds, along with other vocalizations. Joshua also says rocks and pebbles are getting thrown at his house, and he found a 20-foot tree snapped in half. According to the report, Joshua's property is in a very rural area that's surrounded by thousands of uninhabited acres. Our next report is a follow-up from one posted on October 5th in Peoria County, Illinois. A truck driver says he was driving around 6 a.m. and allegedly spotted an 8-foot-tall creature with brown fur and glowing yellow eyes. The report even got local media attention and was featured in a TikTok video that garnered over 360,000 views less than 24 hours after being posted. BFRO founder Matt Moneymaker recently shared an update about the report. Apparently, the witness is a trucking union board member and says he could try passing a rule that lets drivers mount dash cams on their trucks. Moneymaker says he sent the witness a night vision dash cam and believes they could be useful to truckers who have trouble driving those kinds of roads at odd hours. A big thanks to Doug Highcheck for sending me these two TikTok finds. This first one was posted on an account called WV Paranormal. Let's give it a watch.
There's somebody over there.
According to the video's description, this was taken somewhere in Appalachia.
Who is that?
It seems to show a father and daughter sitting in a vehicle, filming an upright figure as it steps out from behind a cluster of trees. Two interesting details worth pointing out are when the father says he ain't supposed to be in our woods, implying this was likely filmed on private property. The timing of everything, from when the video begins recording to when the figure first appears, is definitely worth considering. I'll leave you with a few stills. Let me know what you think.
Separate angles of Bigfoot. It was just highlighted on September 24th, 2024.
This next one comes from an account called Maximum Fear YT. This TikTok post is part of a longer video on his YouTube channel titled, "This new Bigfoot footage is the most convincing yet." The video shows two angles allegedly taken from trail cameras that seem to capture a bipedal ape-like creature. The videos were supposedly taken on September 24th, however the location wasn't mentioned. Clip 1 appears to show the alleged figure turning and leaping from the camera, but catches its facial features and other defining characteristics. Clip 2 appears to have recorded the same figure fleeing and briefly turning towards the camera before resuming its retreat. The video provides a brief breakdown that notes specific details of the creature. It also mentions determinations allegedly made by experts, but does not elaborate. We found 2 posts on the Bigfoot subreddit that describe a pair of alleged first-hand sightings in Washington State and Malaysia. We'll first look at the Washington State one. The OP believes they may have seen an adolescent Sasquatch while driving through Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in western Washington. The OP says they were driving around 60 miles an hour and noticed a dark figure crossing the road in their rearview mirror. The OP said whatever they saw wasn't a huge hulking form. He described it as bulky and being no larger than an average man. So these reasons are why he believes it was likely an adolescent Bigfoot. He also says there were no signs of day use areas, campsites, or other nearby travel routes on either side it crossed. The OP also included a snapshot of the trail they hiked that day and noted a nearby one called the Sasquatch Trail. This next one describes a possible encounter that allegedly happened in Malaysia. While they don't include an exact location, the OP says they were on a mountain summit with family and friends and heard a loud rustling by some nearby trees. The OP believes it wasn't a regular animal and described it as seeming big and strong. After feeling like they were being watched, the OP says they looked back and claimed to get a brief glimpse of an animal that resembled a large brown rock with its hump sticking significantly out of the trees. The OP says whatever they saw looked like the size of a minibus and reminded them of a standing bear. Now we're moving on to the You Decide portion of our report roundup, where we break down a notable photo, video, or other piece of potential Bigfoot evidence. Our goal here is to map out all the facts and details so we can help you decide whether or not it could be the real deal. This one isn't necessarily trending, nor is it relatively new. I actually came across it while researching another segment. Now, I'll let you know ahead of time, you gotta look real closely at this one because what it shows won't jump out in your face. I'll play you an unedited clip first to show you what I mean. Did you see anything in the tree line? Let's zoom in for a closer look. How about this time? We'll slow it down for you a bit. Keep an eye on this area right here. So let's summarize. The clip shows what appears to be a herd of elk grazing in a snow-covered clearing. But if you watch the tree line, right where it starts to bend, you'll briefly notice a dark-colored figure moving from right to left. It then reappears about 20-ish seconds later, heading in the opposite direction. While the figure is really obscured, its movements seem to suggest it's on 2 feet. The video was posted on a channel called Tammy7975 and has almost 588,000 views since it was published on February 11th, 2022. The channel only has 3 videos, with this being the most recent one. It seems to focus on bow hunting, so I suppose it makes sense why the video in question is of an elk herd. And especially since the channel has no previous Bigfoot related content, I'd say that works in favor of the video's credibility. But as I'm sure you can hear in the background, wherever this was filmed happened near a busy sounding roadway. Just something to note. The channel's description simply reads 3D Archery Nanaimo. Nanaimo is a city on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, where elk do reside, so all signs point to this being the video's potential location. Now let's get back to our mysterious figure. There's two big details that I believe made this vague, underwhelming footage worth a closer look. The figure's proximity to the elk, and the elk's apparent obliviousness to its presence. Our shadowy figure looks like it's watching the elk, so why don't they seem to notice or mind it being there, especially if it's a Squatch? And while some people in the comments don't think a human could get this close or stay that quiet to go unnoticed by an entire elk herd, there's an important variable to consider. Perhaps the wind's direction could have kept the figure scent away from the herd, and to that point, snowfall and cold temperatures can hinder an animal's sense of smell. So those factors could potentially help a human and other large animals discreetly get that close to an elk. Many comments don't believe the figure was particularly tall, and I'm inclined to agree. So maybe it's possible the figure's smaller stature helped it remain undetected by the elk herd, but I digress. I did my best to get a potential height range for it and attempted to use an elk's shoulder height for scale, which are roughly 4 to 5.5 feet tall on average. But as you'll see, I don't think it sets any precedent. This was the best still I could find showing both the figure and a nearby elk. I will acknowledge we're limited to using a grainy image of the figure that's pretty obscured, so that won't do us any favors. If I did this right, the elk's shoulder height is 163 pixel units, while the figure's is 122 pixels. With 163 as our base, it puts 122 pixels between 3 to 4 feet relative to the 4 to 5.5 foot height range. However, it's worth noting the figure is further back from the camera than the elk. Since we're using a 2D image, it's going to appear smaller as a result. Although there's a monstrous margin of error to consider, I do believe that latter detail we just covered suggests the figure might be taller than 3 to 4 feet, but probably not tall enough to rule out a human or bear. Although many comments do point out how the figure seemed to walk noticeably smooth and fast at a pace which some argued can't be replicated by a human or bear in snow that deep. Hopefully this breakdown provided enough information to let you decide if it's a hoax, misidentification, or the real deal. Let us know in the comments what you think this video shows. Otherwise, that about does it for our latest report roundup. Remember, if they're out there, you'll hear about them, and who knows, maybe the next one happens somewhere near you.
Tech and innovation is now.
So if Bigfoot's real, how do they communicate? Could they have their own language? And if they do, would it be advanced enough to include things like names? Well, a recent breakthrough study reportedly discovered one primate species that seems to use similar labels for identifying each other, kind of like how we use names. And if that's the case, could these findings potentially help prove Bigfoot's existence by identifying similar vocal patterns? Researchers in Israel claim that a species of monkey called marmosets give vocal labels to each other in a context that we would associate with names. Their study's results were published in the journal Science and detail how marmosets make these vocal labels using high-pitched sounds known as fee calls. The scientists put marmosets in different pairs and observed the monkeys adjusted their vocals to levels that were specific to their conversation partner. The study also noted a typical time structure to these calls, which seemingly showed marmosets uniquely fine-tuning them during individual interactions with other monkeys. These names marmosets apparently give each other were identified using a statistical machine learning model. Simply put, the AI was designed to cluster, classify, and analyze these sounds. To back their claims, researchers played their recordings of them to the marmosets, who responded more often when their specific vocal label, aka name, was in the recording. The team says they plan on using more recent AI technology in their ongoing research. The marmosets they're studying, for example, are being recorded in their living spaces 24/7. Their chatter will train a large machine learning language model that will be designed to finish a series of calls the monkeys start or produce what it deems an appropriate reply. In the past, it's been argued that language is something only unique to humans. However, the use of name-like labels has been documented in other distantly related species, like dolphins, elephants, and parrots. So this study could could mark the first time a non-human primate was observed calling out to other individuals using these kinds of specific labels. Now, if Bigfoot's real, and assuming it's some sort of primate, then one could argue that this study might be able to help researchers make significant breakthroughs in potentially identifying, maybe even decoding Bigfoot vocals. It could provide the framework to develop a machine learning model that collects, isolates, and analyzes potential Bigfoot sounds by identifying similar cues used in the marmoset study. In addition to distinguishing potential Bigfoot audio from other animal sounds, researchers could identify recurring details in them, like structured language elements and patterns pointing to communication. It could even help researchers organize potential Bigfoot audio from various environments and look for any overlap that appears to form vocal patterns. This AI might be able to determine the potential purposes for certain vocals like Ohio howls, grunts, whoops, even samurai chatter. Perhaps this could even decode the potential meanings in well-documented audio like the Sierra sounds, if it determines they actually came from a Bigfoot. So let's say this marmoset study helps create AI technology to similarly analyze potential Bigfoot vocals. If successful, could it lead to Bigfoot's potential discovery by identifying unique characteristics of the creature's alleged vocal patterns? It's definitely an ambitious target, and while a lot more research still needs to be done, the initial results look very promising. As we continue to follow the latest developments on this groundbreaking study, what it reveals about marmoset communication can potentially be used to set expectations on the capabilities of equivalent research centered around Bigfoot, from how their vocal communication is structured, if it can be considered a language, plus the meanings of certain sounds, all without needing a physical specimen.
Pop culture news is now.
For centuries, dogs have been considered man's best friend. They provide unconditional loyalty, love, companionship, and protection. But where do they fit in the Bigfoot world? This segment will explore the potential role dogs could have in this field. It'll examine the reported history of Bigfoot encounters with dogs and try to determine if they can serve as useful tools on field investigations. To start, let's point out some ways dogs are equivalently used in this manner. Many breeds can track scents for miles. Others help law enforcement find drugs, explosives, and locate missing people. So, in theory, dogs can conceivably be trained to apply these same capabilities in Bigfoot research. For example, dogs can use their superior senses, vision, hearing, and smell to detect anything nearby that humans can't on their own. They usually signal when this happens by exhibiting extreme bouts of apprehension, anxiety, overprotectiveness, or noticeably uncharacteristic behavior. I actually witnessed this firsthand on a recent investigation in Western Maine. YouTuber and Bigfoot enthusiast Brian Garvey brought along his dog Chewy, who seemed to sense something lurking around our campsite.
Hey, well, listen to this. I mean, Mike made a really good point. Like, Chewy was focused in the direction where the branches were moving and stuff.
Yep.
As you can see, Chewy appeared to be on high alert.
Left more, and that's where that vocalization came from.
And he's just
He's fixated on that area right now. You can't really see it, but
I mean, this is like on a scale of 1 to 10 on him being
alert?
This is a 10 for alert.
Usually is not.
Look at him.
I've been with him.
He just Chewy.
I've been with him enough that he's not acted like this.
Yeah.
His stare was fixated in one specific direction that slowly shifted counterclockwise,
Chewy
almost
stay.
like whatever he may have detected was circling our camp. I caught up with Brian to recap that night's events and got his thoughts on what he believed Chewy's demeanor could have signaled.
After that first vocal, how he acted after that, how he was so attentive to over on the other side of the dirt road going up the hill up into the woods. I have never in my years of going out with him, being even everyday life, I have never seen him that attentive for that long, focusing in on one area. That to me was intriguing because you put the vocal, that human-like vocal we heard, he wouldn't be that attentive if that was a person doing that. So something was up there. obviously something was up there. He could sense it. He sensed it that whole night after that. I thought that showed that night how much of a great tool he was for us, because it was showing us, he was telling us, showing us something was up there.
To that point, if you ever watched Finding Bigfoot, you probably remember a few episodes where Bobo brought along his dog Monkey on investigations. Monkey never seemed to make a fuss, at least on camera, and Bobo even endorsed the practice of incorporating dogs with squatching. But Bobo's occasional inclusion of Monkey highlights two major factors when assessing a dog's potential impact on Bigfoot investigations: personality and training. For context, opponents of mixing dogs with squatching say their sense, barking, or unpredictability could hinder a Bigfoot investigation. And considering how many stories exist of Bigfoot allegedly killing dogs, some of these creatures seem to have an affinity for slaying our furry friends, especially when they act boldly and unpredictably.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was, whatever it is, it's running.
For example, episode 4 of the Bigfoot Journal covered this well-known 911 call from Washington State in the 1990s.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Hello?
The caller said their dog was killed by something huge and claimed to see a large Bigfoot-like creature in their backyard.
Yes, I'm right in.
This story was posted on the Instagram account new_Hampshire_Sasquatch. It details one eyewitness's horrifying encounter where they reportedly saw a large hairy creature snap their dog's neck and walk off with the body.
One had something. He swears it was a big.
Small Town Monsters filmmaker Alex Pettikov's Honey Island Swamp Monster documentary featured one disturbing story of a Squatch decapitating the witness's dog.
Pulled its head off. So the collar was still on what was left.
It walked off with the dog's head. Then, 3 days later, it allegedly reappeared in the witness's backyard.
He said the head was back there about 3 days, and then the head went missing. And then he said about 3 months later, the head showed up in his yard again.
So let's bring this full circle. These three first-hand accounts, Chewy's unusual actions, and Monkey's low-profile demeanor arguably exemplify how much the aforementioned factors like personality and training may determine a dog's potential impact in the field. So with that said, it seems like such determinations should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Check out Brian's thoughts on the potential impact of these specific factors.
I think when you take a dog out, knowing your dog's mannerisms is going to help you out there. In my case with Chewy, I know the size of an animal by how he reacts. Anything a deer or lower in size, he's going to chase. Anything above that, bear, moose, he's just going to stay. Yeah, I think all depending on what kind of dog it is and the breed and the temperament level. You need to have a dog that is very well behaved and is not a barker and is very protective of you and is very alpha. I think an alpha dog is probably the best tool dog-wise to bring out there.
If you want to see more of Brian and Chewy, check out his YouTube channel, Brian and Chewy Go Hiking. There's links to that and his most recent video in the description. So where do you think dogs stand in the Bigfoot field? Can they serve as resourceful tools that give researchers a potential edge? Or do their flaws outweigh any potential benefits they might offer? And how should we make these determinations? Researchers should consider any advantage they can get, and if man's best friend can offer any kind of potential edge, then it's definitely worth considering.
Bigfoot Spotlight is now.
Alright, thank you for joining our Bigfoot Spotlight, the part of our show where we highlight some recent and upcoming Bigfoot films, events, and live streams. We have a lot to cover in this one, including a list of upcoming 2025 expeditions, a huge cryptid event in Kentucky, the Sasquatch Outpost going all out for Halloween in their latest episode, plus a recent documentary that covers one researcher's harrowing experiences in eastern Ohio. The BFRO released its first round of expeditions for 2025. The announcement was made by BFRO founder Matt Moneymaker on Facebook earlier last month. As of recording this, the BFRO is hosting 12 expeditions throughout the year. Investigations will be held in California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Oklahoma, Washington State, West Virginia, and 2 in Ohio. Check out the BFRO website for more information on dates and registering. New expeditions will probably get added, and I always try to attend any happening near me, so maybe I'll see you on one next year. I wanted to highlight one of my favorite shows on the Untold Network, Sasquatch Outpost. In their most recent episode, host Jim Myers and co-host Isabella Irwin went with a Halloween theme that covered some bizarre videos, supernatural trees, and they spoke with 2 witnesses who said they had a sighting while driving back in September.
Kind of predatorial, 2 eyes, very prominent, very tall. I would estimate at least between 8 and 10 feet tall.
Jim and Sabella spoke with Zach and Elena Smith, who discussed a recent Bigfoot encounter they allegedly had while driving along a rural stretch of highway. Their episode also includes coverage of some videos showing potential paranormal activity. They examine the reported energies and capabilities that trail trees possess and recount Jim's experiences he had with them on a recent expedition. The whole episode runs about 1 hour 40 minutes. Check it out when you have the time because I think it's definitely worth a watch. Next, we've got a new documentary called Sasquatch in Ohio, Bigfoot in the Buckeye State. It dropped last Thursday on the YouTube channel Wild Man of the Woods.
When I turned my head, it was coming off the ground with its hand, stood up into a standing position, and started to walk.
The documentary is centered around the alleged experiences of Bigfoot researcher and Project Zubik member Tina Sands, and dives into the storied history of Sasquatch lore in the Buckeye State. Although it's only 20-ish minutes long, the documentary goes in-depth on Tina's initial sighting and some of her subsequent experiences. As the title suggests, it covers some of Ohio's reported Bigfoot hotspots in the Appalachian foothills and locations like Salt Fork State Park. Last on our list, we're highlighting this year's CryptidCon. This is a 2-day event that opens its doors to any and all cryptid enthusiasts, where you'll get a chance to meet authors, television personalities, and other cryptid researchers. This year, it's being held on November 23rd and 24th at the Clarion Hotel and Conference Center in Lexington, Kentucky. They have a huge lineup of guests from across the cryptid spectrum, including high-profile Bigfoot researchers like Charlie Raymond, Matt Pruitt, Cliff Barrickman, Renee Holland, and many other prominent names. Visit their website, cryptidcon.com, for more information on getting tickets. Well, that about does it for episode 6. Make sure to check the video's description for more information on this episode's segments. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share here at Untold and the CARC. If you have any questions, a story to share, or want the CARC to investigate your Bigfoot encounter, shoot us an email or drop a line in the comments. For Chuck Larson and Toby Crum, I'm Mike Luci signing off. We appreciate each and every one of you for watching. It's been a blast like always. Until next time.
Program is distributed by the Untold Radio Network. All rights reserved.